Okay, this is where you should pause the video and go get something to drink, maybe a small snack. We're not going to be here all day, but it's still nice to have, right? So, I've got this is my second Frankford Arsenal X10. This is this one's set up for rifle, so I've got a Mark 7 trimmer up here, and Mr. Bullet Feeder set up in 220 or set up for 223. On the other side of the bench down here, I have a 9mm set up on another Frankford Arsenal X10. So, as you've seen in the first clip here, it's loud. When you do 223, you should set this up not in your house. And I only say that because I guess if you want to do a press that's just for prepping brass and then set up a Frankford Arsenal X10 in your house or in your basement to just load it, it's not loud, but I want to do everything on the press and be done. And so I am running Lyman Pro dies, and if you've seen in the video, they're the stainless dies. And it's not saying that I had Reddings on here before. Are the Lymans better than the Reddings? Well, they're stainless, so you don't have any rust. And the sizing die really is the make or break die in this set. So the Redding didn't have a carbide insert, wasn't a carbide sizer, but it did have a neck sizer. However, on the Lyman Pro, it's got that primer flick, which I actually really like. When I set up my 9mm one, that was the first set of dies I put on it. I ordered it with Lyman Pro, and that primer flick was I just thought that was so reassuring. Really nice. I had a set of Reddings, and just to try to keep the build cost down on this press, I didn't get the Lyman Pro, and I should have. I should have just did it right from the beginning. I never measured it, but on the sizing die, the Lyman Pro die, it looks like it does a little bit of neck sizing, but I haven't compared them. I think, well, this is subjective, but I think if you can get the Lyman Pro cheap enough, they are worth the price. I think the going rate for these is like $250 for the rifle 223 ones. It's worth it for me because I just don't have to deal with rust. Stainless is also quite hard. It's harder than what Redding was using, and that's not to say that your dies are wearing out, but stainless is tough. It's pretty tough stuff. And then it comes with the M die, your sort of case flaring, which you'll need if you bullet feed. Micrometer crimp, it's subjective. I just like to make quick adjustments, lock the body and make quick adjustments. It's worth it for me in that respect. There's actually almost 2,000 rounds loaded on this one, and the 9mm is sitting at 3 or 4,000 rounds at least. I did break a bearing on this one. This press, believe it or not, has given me quite a bit more problems than the other one. That could be me. I did break a bearing, and I also noticed that there was a bolt loose on the, I don't know if you want to call it the cam arm, but the big arm on the other side, that top bolt was loose right from the factory, which I didn't catch it for a couple hundred rounds anyway. I couldn't get the indexing to adjust properly, and it was because of that cam arm. I ended up breaking a bearing, which I found at Grainger, a local Grainger store. So at first, even though my 9mm, I had some issues in the beginning. Mostly it was just the primer mechanism. The primer mechanism would not feed CCI primers. At first it did. The first 500-600 rounds it was flawless. But then out of the blue it just quit wanting to use CCI primers. Then I bought a pack, just a pack of Federals. It wouldn't really run those reliably. Then I bought a pack of Fiocchis. It really didn't like those. Then I got a pack of Winchesters, and it kind of liked those. But I really don't like Winchester primers. I got a hold of Frankford Arsenal, and they gave me a new primer mechanism. This one started to have primers flipping all the time, jamming it up, and it still does once in a while. But I did get a new primer mechanism. It runs every primer perfectly. But every once in a while, when the priming ram is coming down, the primer sits goofy, and when it indexes, it'll jam it up. So here's a pro tip. When you break this down, or how about not when you break it down, but how about, like for example, I'm loading, right now I'm loading 77 grain Nosler OTMs. So once these are done, and before I go to 55 grain jacketed hollow points, a good thing to do, take your head off, take your shell plate off, clean everything underneath, take your primer mechanism off, empty all the primers out, and go in each hole with a cotton swab. Clean those out. You will be surprised how dirty those get, and I attribute that to some of the priming issues that I do have. As far as those primers, when the ram comes down, the primer gets it doesn't fall flush. So clean those out when you're done, before you move on to the next size bullet, or the next bullet. Or if you just constantly run 55 grain full metal jacket to plink with, then I would say about every 500 to not 500, but at least every 1,000 rounds, stop and clean underneath in case of any spilt powder. And there's a little powder that dribbles, but just go and do like a little wipe down, clean out that stuff. The speaking of powder, the Frankford Arsenal powder drop, I could not get it to to flawlessly drop powder. So I've got I'll show you real quick. I've got a Hornady up here, and that Hornady one I've had for quite some time. And I tested the Frankford Arsenal on this All-American 8. Let's get you kind of tilted over here. And I dropped and dropped and dropped, and I probably dropped maybe 10 rounds. It was never even close. I'll just throw a number out there. If I was dropping 22 grains, it would do like 22.5, 21, 21, 20 and a half, 23. I never could get it. And they sent me a new one, and before I even set it up, I hooked it up here, and the same thing. It just wouldn't, it just couldn't meter consistently for rifle. Now, that one over there for pistol, once I get it set, and I will throw 10 rounds, and I'll weigh the first 2 or 3, then I'll weigh the 10th. And if it's the same or within 2/10, I'm good. And then I will, I'll go along, I'll be loading it, and I'll just randomly check. And if it's still the same, I don't ever check it again. It just runs. For pistol, that one just is on top of it. Reliable. It's just really reliable. This Hornady lock and load, I've got 2 of them. One's mounted on a bench stand. When you set these, once they're set and once they sort of settle in, this thing is always plus or minus 3/10. And I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, a half, but it's way more accurate than a half, plus or minus. It is plus or minus 3/10 consistently. 100 rounds later, it is right on. So I ended up just hooking that up, and I've been satisfied with it. So things to consider when you get the trimmer: of course, you need a vacuum attachment. You need a small shop vac, which I've got one set up. People were telling me, yeah, you turn it on every 5 or 10 rounds. No, you shouldn't do that, because those chips generally fall into the brass, and then you've got that, it's taking up that volume. And while it's not a lot of chips, I've already seen how many fall in on more than one occasion just messing around with it. Get the vacuum attachment. If you're gonna run this like I'm running it, just one and done, get the vacuum attachment. But outside of that, when you get it, the first thing you should do is, obviously you've seen the videos, clean everything, set your indexing. Indexing's not hard. You don't need no special die. You don't need no special fixture. I seen someone selling it's like a 9mm case type thing that you put in here, and you go up and down, make sure it don't touch it. You don't need that shit. Setting the indexing on this is extremely easy. When you pull the ram, the shell plate should not move. I can't do this one because it's filled with brass, but when you pull that down, you pull this arm halfway and it'll click, and it's ready to go back. Your shell plate should not move. It shouldn't kind of go this way and fall back in place. None of that. And that's it. If you can get the shell plate to not move as you're bringing that down, it should only move on the way back. Your indexing is good. And these things are just fantastic for the price. I just think that you have to have patience and make sure it's all set up right. It's so good, I bought 2. I had that one, and I was so impressed with my 9mm one, I bought another one. And that's how good they are. They're just fabulous. The only thing, in my opinion, the only thing Frankford Arsenal needs to do is make a primer attachment that, maybe it's up here and sort of over here or something, where you can just pour primers in it and it vibrates and loads the tube itself. Sort of like you see the Mark 7s. You just dump them in, it's got the little spiral tray, it vibrates, flips them the right way, and it just keeps sending them down. There's a sensor so that once it's full, it stops, and then as it needs more, it vibrates and it sends more primers down the trough. That's what they need. That would make this press so self-sufficient, extremely self-sufficient. I mean, you fill up your powder hopper, you fill, your bullet feeder, your case feeder hoppers, fill your primer hopper, and then as you need them, you don't have to take 2 or 3 minutes. I do have this to fill up the tubes, and it does make it quick, but you're still, 3-minute stop, where if you had trays already out of the sleeves as you're going, you could just dump a tray in. That's all you need and just keep rolling, But all in all, I am extremely happy. Oh, and I'll tell you something else. Frankford Arsenal needs dust covers because after a while, that's the other thing. I've got to stop and clean because there's dust all over. But dust covers, I know that's trivial and they're probably $20. They'll probably charge you $20, $30, $40, but I really do see the need for them. But I guess that's it in a nutshell for these presses. If you do join the Frankford Arsenal groups that you see on Facebook, I mean, there's a myriad of things. People complain about this and that, and I just think a lot of people aren't mechanically inclined enough to really know what's going on the press. Because, like I said, when I was having all the problems with this press, basically, and I was getting frustrated, and basically what I did is I just stopped and just started all over again. I set up each die. I think the biggest thing that was giving me problems really was the first bullet feeder I tried. It was a 3D printed one. It was really garbage. Oh, and here's another thing. For this one, but I don't need it for that one. But for this one, when you're swaging, what you want to do, actually I'll show you real quick. You want to take a piece of brass. And you can see where I cut it in half. I just use a belt sander, and I ground it in half. That way, when you put this up here and set your swage, you can see the swager pin. And you want to pretty much bottom that swaging pin in that primer pocket. Because my number one biggest issue was I would, every 5 or every 6, I would get a primer that was half sideways. And it fucking pissed me off so bad, okay? Well, I ended up making one of these. I'm going to call it a gauge. It's not a gauge, but I ended up making one of these. And I set my swager to bottom the fuck out in that thing. And then over top of the priming station, I don't have a hold down die in that. I really don't think you need a hold down die there. You don't need a hold down die on this. On this All-American 8, we've never needed hold down dies priming. Never. So what I did put over it, though, was I put a self-centering case mouth flaring tool that I got from FW Arms. It's a tester, so I don't know if these are on their website, but it's got like this floating chamber in it, okay? Now, it's not set to actually flare the case mouth. What I'm doing with it is I'm using the case mouth flaring rod as a centerer. And that way, when this priming rod comes up, that rod is in the case mouth. It's holding its center, and the swager has really swaged the primer pocket good. Ever since I set that up, I've not had that fucking problem. the primers have just went in perfectly all the fucking time. And I don't know if that's because I really shoved my my rod deeper to flare out, to take out that crimp, that swaging rod. I've set it deeper, but I do think a lot of it has to do with this self-centering die. Now, over on my 9mm press, I've never had that issue. I've never had a primer flip half sideways. I've never had one get hung up and smashed. I've never had one upside down. Nothing. For 9mm, that's been perfect. For 223, I need that. If I take that die off, it fucks everything up. But I can load now without even having to check it, without worrying. Nothing. So that's another thing you might want to consider. But outside of that, and we're talking rifles here, you definitely want to make sure that all your cords are out of the way, especially when you run this trimmer, because this trimmer head, man, this thing is high speed. It's flying. You get any cables around that, it'll melt them, it'll grab them, it'll rip them off. So as neatly as you can, tie back any cables or any power cords or any of that are around this trimmer, because that trimmer is no joke. It's no joke. But outside of that, that's about the biggest thing I can say. Always try to keep your cords nice and tidy, and you want to make sure everything is as clean as it can be as far as the cords go. And here's sort of another, and this video is really long, but here's sort of another pro tip. When you first get this and you're going through everything, don't even put your covers on. I have the swaging cover off because I was always messing with that. I just haven't put it on. The press is really pretty with the covers on, but leave them, all of them. Don't put any of them on. Make sure you clean everything, but don't put the covers on until you've ran 5, 6, 7, 800 rounds, maybe your first 1,000 rounds through it. That way, if any of these nuts get loose, or you need to make adjustments, you don't have to fiddle fuck around with ripping these covers off, but that's pretty much about it. If you were wanting to do 223, I load 223 on this press now just as fast as I can load 9mm on that press. If you need to get a lot of 223 done, and I had all these bullets. I've got thousands of bullets, and I just could not get I couldn't get any progress on this All-American 8. I mean, I just couldn't make it, you know what I mean? I couldn't get anything done as fast as I wanted to. So, like I said, I bought another one of these. It's all set up. I just slammed the 223 out. But if you're planning on doing this, plan on I say the Mark 7 trimmer because I think it's thinner than the Dillon. I don't think I would buy any. I've seen some on eBay that were, $150, $200. But I just didn't want no fucking dick in the dog bullshit. So I got the Mark 7. I got the Mark 7 trim die, and it's been flawless. It is, any trim die is a pain to set up. This one is sort of a pain, because if you want to adjust it 1 thou or 2 thou or 3 thou, you've got to undo this bottom nut, and you got to undo your vacuum attachment, spin it maybe just a little bit. If I ever need to reset it up for anything, I will make a video on that, but the long and the short is you might want some feelers gauges. And you might want to set your end mill about 5 thou off the bottom face of the inside of that trim die. But that's another topic for another time. And then when it comes to bullet feeders, don't fucking play around. You work too hard for your money to fuck around with some cheap ass 3D printed garbage bullet feeder. Save yourself time and hassle and a lot of bullshit, and just get a Mr. Bullet Feeder, the bullet feeder, and get the Mr. Bullet Feeder dropper die. I've got a lead die around here, and you can do this. I took the lead bullet feeding die and I just kept feeding it by hand, and that's pretty quick. If you don't have the money for the Mr. Bullet Feeder, you can get a cheap Lee bullet feed die, and it holds 3, and you just got to keep putting one in it if you can remember to put one in it. But I will say this: ever since I got that Mr. Bullet Feeder up there and I got rid of that Lee die, I don't have to fuck around with no bullshit. As I'm loading, I'm just watching and making sure that next bullet is on there, and I keep an eye on my powder, and everything works out. When the primers run out, the sensor goes off. When obviously the case feeder runs out of cases, you just don't get no more cases. But I just always keep an eye on the bullet, make sure another bullet has fallen, and then look up at the powder measure and make sure it's always got powder. And I'm telling you, this thing is very smooth. Very smooth. I always wanted to get Mark 7 presses, complete presses, but I'm doing the same thing at half the cost of the setup of a Mark 7 to be set up this way. Half the cost at least. Well, I don't want to say half, because I think Double Alpha had them completely kitted out for $3.5, $4. So yeah, I guess I would say half, because I've got 2,000 in this press. I've got maybe 2,000 in that press. So yeah, half the price of the Mark 7. And I doubt you could set up a Dillon this cheap either. And reloading's all about trying to save some money. That's what they told me. Anyway, hey, that's it. I just wanted to give you, and I know 27 minutes, man, you don't want to sit around 27 minutes, but here we are. But yeah, they're really nice. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Maybe I'll do a breakdown on how I set it up later on. But you could see from the initial clip of me running this thing, you have an idea of what it's like. So, all right, guys. Hey, we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks a whole lot.